Hey, gang, 2025 is here. It has begun with a bang. Parks Casino is ready for all the action. Are you ready for Parks Casino? The Excite Center, what a great venue. Go to the Excite Center at Parks Casino. You'll see concerts, you'll see comedy, you'll see MMA, you'll see boxing, all in the state of the art Excite Center. Thousands of state of the art slots, live table games, a beautiful poker room, action, entertainment, excitement. Here are some of the headliners. Richard Kind from Curb. I love Curb. I love Richard from Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's a Bucks Countyan. I didn't know that. From Pennsbury. Country artist Cole Swindell is coming. Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains. Scott McCreery from American Idol. Magician Michael Carbonaro. A second show added for comedian Ron White, funny guy. Country superstar Lee Brice. Comedian Larry the Cable Guy, May 16. Kevin Downey Jr. this Thursday night from America's Got Talent, headlining the Joe Conklin Comedy Night, which is a lot of fun and a great deal. I remember I went to that. It's like $20 and you got a drink and your admission, something like that. And Joe's a funny guy. Parks Casino, parkscasino.com to get all your tickets. This is how you win. You got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. What a day yesterday was. I am looking at the front page of today's New York Times above the fold color photograph of Donald Trump being sworn in as President 47. The headline, Trump caps return to power, vowing to stop a U.S. decline. I spent the day in Washington yesterday, not only hosting on SiriusXM, but then participating with Anderson Cooper in CNN's coverage. I spent the afternoon, on set and then interspersing comments as the events would allow. But I have to say, for me, the most poignant moment of the day, as it was 8 years ago, when Donald Trump was first sworn into office. 8 years ago, I was outside on a rooftop because CNN had built a set that was overlooking the Capitol. And so I was in that perch when President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama exited with now President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump on the east side of the Capitol. They get in Marine One, they take off, they circle down to the monument, to the White House, take a last look at the White House, and then go off to Andrews Air Force Base. I wasn't outside, but I was in the CNN building, which is adjacent to the Capitol yesterday, and was able to see Marine One do that loop. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. One of our sons, who is in law school in Washington, lives in an apartment building that's in that whole area. And I could see his apartment building from the CNN building from my window. I was there with David Urban, who's a fellow Pennsylvanian, and Ellie Honig, who's a friend of the program. And I called my son, and he said to me, I'm on the roof, Dad. I'm on the roof. I'm ready to see. And I was able to see Marine One carrying the Bidens head toward the White House. And it for me is a goosebump moment in the way that it was 8 years ago. I mean, that sort of brought home the whole peaceful, thank God this time, we'll come back to that, transition of power. So, yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of cool things in DC, but the coolest of them, Marine One showing the Bidens the White House for the last time as they then, in their case, went to Andrews and then took off to California. Yesterday's poll results, we had more than 30,000 people cast ballots. Will Donald Trump's inaugural address be more conciliatory or combative? 82.25% had the correct answer. I guess I was too glass half full myself. It was clearly combative. It was clearly combative. As I say, I hustled off radio yesterday, went to CNN, watched the inaugural address before then going on set where I spent the afternoon. And of course, on radio yesterday, I had reminded everybody of inaugural address number one. The American carnage comments where Trump said for too many, of our citizens, a different reality exists. Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation, an education system flush with cash, but which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge, crime and gangs and drugs, yada, yada. This American carnage stops right now, which caused President George W. Bush, reportedly, 3 people who heard him say it, according to the New Yorker, that was some weird shit. This time, Donald Trump had pledged a unity message, which is why yesterday's poll question was what it was. Is it going to be more conciliatory? He spoke for about 30 minutes. The setting was ornate because they say the weather, they moved everything inside. There were only 600 plus instead of tens of thousands. Most members of Congress were there. They occupied, I think, more than half the seats. The verbal pitch, the verbal tone of his voice was more staid than it would have been at a rally. But yesterday, as I said to Anderson Cooper on CNN, if I showed you a transcript, and this is why in the newsletter today, I have printed not one of the reviews of Trump's speech, but to make my point, I have provided the link to the White House website, whitehouse.gov. By the way, that's another story in terms of the dramatic shift that White House Gov made yesterday with this, like, Hollywood-esque movie about Trump that they immediately put on the site. But if you go and you read the transcript of Trump's inaugural address, I could convince you that it was just another campaign rally, or that it was one of Trump's State of the Union addresses. Years of radical and corrupt establishment, he said, as Joe Biden is 10 feet away from him, and Bill Clinton is there, and Barack Obama is there. He spoke of a society broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. Americans cannot manage simple crises at home, yet can stumble into catastrophic events abroad. By the way, all of these things worthy of discussion and consideration, but time and a place, time and a place, time and a place. What there was none of was anything aspirational. There was nothing that was aspirational, at least according to me, and nothing. This is the part that disappointed me the most in the inaugural events. There was nothing there extending an olive branch to the half the country that didn't vote for him. I'll tell you one thing I noted, not only in his remarks, but as I watched the whole day, not only as a commentator on radio and television, but then when I got back home at night last night and watched all of the events, the 8 p.m. hour where he was signing all the executive orders and the way he comported himself at the balls and so forth, the 3 balls that he attended, he's always been a confident guy. So don't mistake what I'm about to say for confidence, but there's a self-assuredness to him this time. He knows the ropes. Good news for you if you're a Trump supporter, something that will cause you a lot of agita if you're not. He knows what he wants to do, and he knows how to do it this time. The last time he'd had Chris Christie prepare the transition file, Donald Trump did not expect to win the election in 2016 and came into power not ready to have his feet hit the ground running. That's different. And even though some of those executive orders don't have, none of them have the heft of congressional action and then a president signing them into law, but they were a display of him knowing what he wants to do, knowing exactly what he wants to do. So they were off to the races. And what was yesterday just a packed day, one that culminated with his clemency for the J6ers. All of them signed in front of live cameras in the Oval Office before he headed off to the inaugural balls. Look, we previously on January 6th, we polled on the J6er issue. It was the day that I had veteran criminal defense attorney William J. Brennan and Michael Vanderveen in front of me. They represented Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial and represent a number of J6ers. And it was Brennan who, convinced me that I should ask this question, even though I thought nobody is going to say in the alternative. The question that I worded that day was this: given Trump's pardon promises, should the DOJ still prosecute nonviolent J6 participants? And 72.95% of us, thankfully I was in the majority on that one, said yes. I think it's a terrible move. I think it's a terrible move that there was such blanket clemency given to the J6ers. My standard was that anyone who breached the Capitol, obviously somebody involved in violence, wherever they were, should not be afforded any clemency. But I also thought that anybody who breached the Capitol, walked through the window, walked through one of those doors, should be given no slack. That is my position, remains my position. Were there some overzealous prosecutions among the 1,500? I'm sure there were. And for someone who did not trespass in the Capitol and wasn't involved in any violence, I'm open to the idea of clemency. That was the outcome of my conversation with lawyers Vanderveen and Brennan. That was my perspective. And I thought that House Speaker Mike Johnson, I thought that J.D. Vance, among others, saw it the same way that I did. But Trump signed clemency orders that took care of everybody in the whole process. Quote, this is from the Times coverage. President Donald Trump granted a blanket pardon Monday evening to virtually all the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot defendants and commuted the sentences of the remaining 14, a sweeping move that gives some form of clemency to all those charged or convicted in the riot. So we've polled on this already. I feel comfortable in saying that overwhelmingly, those who are listeners, watchers of mine, subscribers of the news, we agree that the J6ers should not have been afforded the blanket clemency that Trump gave them. Have I made that clear? Okay, because that's the no-brainer. Now, of course, before Trump pardoned the J6ers, Biden preemptively pardoned a number of people. He had pardoned Dr. Fauci. He had pardoned former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley. General Milley's portrait has already been taken down at the Pentagon. And he provided pardons, Biden did, for the J6 committee members, including for Adam Schiff, now Senator Adam Schiff, who doesn't want it. And you can read the story today at the Smerconish.com newsletter. Schiff called his preemptive pardon from Biden unnecessary and unwise. I continue to believe you do realize, right, that there's privilege that attaches to the members of Congress. So that's why I don't like the idea. They already are protected. I don't know why former President Biden felt that necessary. Adam Schiff said, I continue to believe that the grant of pardons to a committee that undertook such important work to uphold the law was necessary, and because of the precedent that it establishes, unwise. I'll come back to that point because that's my big point. And remember, Biden had recently given clemency to so many others. Hunter Biden, obviously, and we talked about that extensively. I don't have a problem. I'll say it again for the 1,000th time. I don't have a problem with Hunter Biden being provided clemency, a pardon in this case, by his father. I just object to Joe Biden having told us for so long that he was never going to do it. And then as a Pennsylvanian, it also irks me that among the 1,500 whose sentences Biden commuted recently was one of the Cash for Kids judges. And I thought that was absolutely appalling. I followed that case. The two judges, the lawyer, they were in cahoots. These juveniles had no due process rights, and they were shipped off to I don't know what I should say. I don't know that I should describe it as a jail, but it was a place where the money ended up coming back to the lawyer and to the two judges. I mean, absolutely disgraceful. absolutely disgraceful. And one of those judges got a huge break from Biden. And I also don't like the fact that the Pelletier case was another. This guy who was convicted of killing 2 FBI agents, and Christopher Wray objected. We just learned, I have that story in the newsletter today. He told the White House that commuting Peltier's sentence, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, would be shattering to the victim's loved one and undermine the principles of justice. That is also, I think, appalling. And of course, and I'm getting to today's poll question, 22 minutes before leaving office, Trump said he was already giving his inaugural address when this happened. I don't think that's literally true, but certainly the inaugural activities were underway when outgoing President Biden, 22 minutes in advance of Trump being sworn in, gives a pardon to 5 family members. And that is today's poll question at Smerconish.com. Was that justified? I don't like it. I don't like it. My gut tells me, just in the nature of the way that people vote on my poll questions, that many who vote will think it was justified. I don't like any of these pardons. Okay, I think that the pardon power has now been, let me be crystal clear on this. I think that the pardon power has now been abused by both these presidents. And it just reinforces a perception of so many that it's fungible. And there's been such now disregard and watering down for the rule of law. And by the way, I mean, I get it. I totally get it. From the Trump perspective, the perception is that the DOJ and state prosecutors were unleashed to try and take down Donald Trump. I believe that. And I believe that a large part of the reason that Donald Trump was put back in office was the public's response to all of those investigative efforts of Trump, which is not to absolve Trump, but it's my way of saying for the umpteenth time that the Alvin Bragg case should never have been brought, and ended up helping out Donald Trump by reinforcing it. It cast the die, and it reinforced this perception that Trump was being persecuted. And then Trump, with all of his threats about the Bidens and the fact that he does give slack and total legal protection to the J6ers, then he becomes just as bad. And then Biden ends up, pardoning his family because he says, I don't think they've done anything wrong. But now I need to protect them against Donald Trump. The whole thing is just bad. And I'm sure my mother will watch this and, remind me that 2 wrongs don't make a right, or some such thing. The Wall Street Journal today. Now we're talking about the Biden family pardons. This is the inevitable political logic of President Biden's lawfare campaign. His administration became the first in history to unleash the Justice Department on a former president and political rival. As we and others warned, the precedent would tempt future presidents to do the same, perhaps as early as Mr. Biden's immediate successor. As he did with Hunter, he gave his family clemency for unspecified acts since January 1, 2014. Think of that. This timing is important because a House investigation alleges that Biden family members received money from foreign sources through shadow accounts. The pardons are, oh my gosh, I struggle with this word, ignominious final act by a president who has never lived up to his self-advertising as a protector of democratic norms. And I just have to say, and then I'm finished talking about President Biden for a while. The way in which he's harmed his legacy, just with self-inflicted wounds, running for re-election, staying in the election too long, the saying he wasn't going to pardon Hunter when all along I'm sure that he was, and then pardoning his own family members on the way out the door. He has nobody to blame for his 36% approval rating but himself. Now let me say for the 3rd time, and I'll stop, Donald Trump should never have provided the clemency to the J6ers that he did. And the events, as I speak, are so fresh. By the end of today, I'm convinced we're going to be seeing film footage of some of the most violent of these individuals, and the media will be able to ISO on them and say, can you believe this guy has just been given slack by President Trump? Anybody who was violent, anybody who breached the Capitol should have been shown no mercy, in my opinion. Now, the harder question is the Biden family members. The Biden family members. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like any of this. I don't like any of this. For me, the pardon power, which is absolute, I get it. You know, there ought to be some remorse. Somebody who did wrong, and a president now says, you know what, maybe there was excessive punishment here. You've paid your debt to society. You've shown us that you want a second chance, and we're gonna give you a clean slate. But not this. But not this. Go vote at Smerconish. Wow, that was a lot. Damn, that was a lot. Go vote at Smerconish.com. And by the way, one other thing I said on television, I'll say it again right now. In the end, I think Biden did Trump a favor. In the end, I think that I said this to Anderson Cooper yesterday. I think that Biden did Trump a favor by pardoning Mark Milley and by pardoning the members of his family, because Trump should never have gone after or Dr. Fauci. Like, move on. In the second inaugural address that Trump gave yesterday, no, I don't mean you, Michael. Do you mean when he stood there after being sworn? No. He gave two inaugural addresses yesterday. One he gave in the rotunda. The other he gave downstairs to supporters. And in the second inaugural address, he started really relitigating 2020 again. Let's move on. Ladies and gentlemen, go vote at Smerconish.com and tell me whether President Biden was justified in pardoning 5 family members. Mine's a no vote. Mine is a no vote, and I am prepared to be in the minority. Again,